Welcome to Bat Therapy, psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources.
All right, so we've kind of talked about this before a little bit when we were doing our it was the season where we were going through different people's therapists and we talked about Lex's therapist,
Who was
right?
terrible.
Who was a lot of them were terrible that season, but we're going to be going back because we're doing Heroes in Training and we thought it would be very weird to just not talk about Smallville because
Yeah, you gotta do it.
yeah, it went for it. When a show makes it for 10 seasons, it's a pillar of nerddom, right? Like it earned its spot, right? And so yeah, it's one of those things. I'm like, okay, yeah, if we talked about Flash and Arrow, we're gonna talk about what made Flash and Arrow great, and it was Smallville.
That's true. Smallville, I think, that was one of the initial, if not the initial show that got all that stuff rolling.
It was the first. It was on the CW, yes, because it started coming on I think it was coming on back when the CW was still called the WB.
WB. I was wondering if it was a WB show. Oh, we are aging ourselves.
It was called the WB, and it had the dancing frog and all that. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Hated that frog. It was a gaslighting frog, right? Because it would always dance and everything. And you remember the cartoon? So in the cartoons, the guy had that frog, and it would hello, my baby, hello, my darling, do all this singing and dancing. And then when the guy would try and show it to someone, it would just play dead.
Yeah.
You've
been holding this in for a long time, haven't you?
Yes, from time to time, after a couple drinks, frog does normally come up. It does come up and touch.
So let's talk Clark Kent in Smallville.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're going to rely on you for the bulk of the knowledge because, let's be real, I did not watch 10 seasons of Smallville to prep for today. Sorry, that did not happen. But I know you have that in your memory banks stored for any moment where you can pull that information out. So yeah. I'm relying on you for the details. But okay. So because I kept texting you laughing hysterically that I started rewatching the first season. And first off, OMG. It's so great. It so dates itself of when it was built. The music, the guy with the telescope peering into the girl next door's place, but for some reason we didn't consider it creepy back then.
The obvious people in their 20s that are saying they're 14-year-olds.
The people in their 20s that are at the peak of their life saying, oh gosh, darn it, I'm an awkward teenager. Meanwhile, they're the most beautiful people alive.
Insanely good-looking people, right? It is really funny seeing them because I'm like, these people have clearly never seen a freshman in high school in their life.
And then Clark's getting picked on like he couldn't beat even if they don't know he has superpowers.
It was kryptonite.
You look at this dude and you go, okay, that dude could beat me up. And he works on the farm, for goodness sake. I mean, he's a bulky dude.
He is. And they do everything they can to make him small in that first season. And it's really funny because Tom Welling, like you said, he's already a naturally big guy. And then in Smallville, they kind of put him in clothing that's a little, it seems like it might be a little bit bigger. And then they put him next to Whitney, who's just a fully grown man. And they're like, no, he's a senior. It's That man clearly has a 401k and at least two cars. Like, and sure,
It's so great.
and sure, he dates Lana, who's a freshman in high school, and you know what? We're just
Yeah.
gonna let it slide. And
Oh,
like,
and but let's also not forget this introduced a lot of people too that came into things later. Jensen Ackles was in this.
yeah.
Um gosh, I'm blanking on his name. What's his name? Was Green Arrow?
Oh yeah, just yeah.
Oh, what is his name?
Justin Hart.
Hartley? Maybe?
Yeah, yeah,
That might be it.
yes. I think that's it.
There yeah, there
I feel
were
bad. I'm sorry, Justin. I'm so sorry.
clearly we prepped really hard, so we knew everybody's names. But yeah, there were a lot of people that came in that then did later shows too. Yeah, there's a lot of Smallville. Good memories. Okay, so can we talk about how you've got this kid? He's adopted. He knows he's
Right,
adopted.
right.
He's what? 14? No,
He's
15?
supposed to
16.
be. He's supposed to be like
I think he's 16.
14 or 15 because season 4 is his senior year. So each season is supposed to be a year.
So, okay, I know this is Smallville, it's a rural area, so people drive potentially before they have a license, but Lex gets him a truck within the first few episodes that he wants to drive. So the
That's
timing of these
true.
seasons is weird.
That's
Maybe each
true.
season
I
is
never
part of
thought about.
a
I did
year.
not think about that. Yeah, I always. Yeah, because
There's
it's
weird stuff going on here. Whatever,
there
whatever.
is there is.
But okay, you've got a 14 to 16-year-old who looks 35 and he knows he's adopted. He knows he's got these unexplainable things. He can race around really quickly and whatnot. But I think episode one, if not one, then two. Surprise! You were adopted from space.
It's one. Yeah, right off the bat. Right off
So,
the bat. Yeah.
so Hellboy.
Well,
Wow.
it's funny because like he should have asked these questions long before that. Like, as someone with a
Yeah.
4-year-old that already asked questions like that, like the fact that Clark is like asking his dad, like, why am I so fast? Why am I indestructible? What's going on here? Like the fact that he's asking that now, I'm like, this should have probably happened in like fourth grade latest.
Mm.
But you know what? For the sake of a good TV show, sure. He's finding out
Well,
now.
and
And
okay, so his parents are very wholesome and seem very supportive and caring, and honestly, some of the parents you'd probably hope for if you're dealing with a weird, unique situation like this. But no one's perfect, and families vary in terms of how much you can question things. And so, for
yes,
example, Clark's told don't try out for football, and you have responsibilities on the farm, and this, that, and the other. And these aren't bad things. It might be a family dynamic where the way of the parents goes versus families where there's more of that questioning
yeah,
independence vibe.
yeah. Jonathan Kent,
Maybe that explains it.
yeah, Jonathan Kent's definitely more my way or the highway
Mm-hmm. Yep.
in Smallville, and I don't blame him because of the level of secrets that they have
Yeah.
to keep. He's like, if anyone breaks into our barn, they're going to find a spaceship. Like,
Can you imagine the level of stress?
that's a lot. That's a lot. Most people have lawnmowers there, right? Like that's a lot. Like, oh man, like don't go into the barn, and like making sure to grow corn around it every season, no matter what. Like, we gotta hide that barn. Like, it's the little things that I think would make it difficult. And
Well, and
so
also,
the
why is no one
kids,
asking questions that they don't need to hire more farm hands
yeah,
to keep things going?
yeah, because the thing is, and the thing, so this is one thing that's really funny about Smallville. It's that things go from 0 to 100 the
Yeah.
moment Clark hits this first episode. Because before that, there's all these questions that we just don't need answered, I guess. It's like, oh, I guess he had no problem getting blood tested then or
Mm.
having an immunization record then, right? It's
Oh
all
yeah.
of these things
Yeah.
right? That conveniently are like, oh, we've never had to worry about it. To the point that when I was rewatching the first episode, I was like, are they saying that his invulnerability is just now kicking in?
Mm,
Because that's what it made it seem like when
it
Clark
did.
goes and like shoves his hand into like the compactor or the whatever it is, and it breaks. His dad's like, "Whoa, what was that?" Okay,
Hmm.
like okay, they did not know until now
So
that he was invulnerable.
I think you're right. It seemed he had the speed for a while. And that's how the show seems to do it anyway, is he gradually gains more of his powers. So it seems that there might be something happening with hormonal changes and everything and developmental changes, which makes sense.
Yeah, it
At a
does.
certain stage you learn how to talk, learn how to walk, learn how to x-ray vision into the girls' locker room and then
Yeah,
just stare.
but also if I am a fifth grader with super speed, every single person in the county will know within the hour. Like that's the
That's
thing.
true. I believe that
That's
about you.
I believe that about any fifth grader. This is not a me thing. On the playground, all of
Mm,
a sudden people are running around and you're 30 times faster than the fastest person. Yeah. I'm gonna go get ice cream right now and I'm gonna bring it back and eat it in front of everybody. Cause I can. Like
see,
that's what
I was the kid that was afraid of getting in trouble and was convinced that if I did something that it would be caught. So I don't know. I think I would be more tentative,
I was
but
the
it
kid
would
that
be
was
very
gonna get in
tempting.
trouble anyway, so might as well at least have it not be for some BS reason. Cause
Yeah.
I was the
So
kid
clearly
like,
Clark
yeah,
leans more my direction personality wise than yours because he wasn't caught in 5th grade with his
yeah,
speedy speediness.
yeah. But
He
yeah,
definitely tries to hang back a little bit. But yeah, things definitely
yeah,
start hitting one after the other, and I think
yeah. And that's
also,
life.
where has the kryptonite been this whole time? Has it just not
That's
affected him until now?
you're
Is it
reading my
just
mind.
coming up for some reason? And by the way, watching this made me realize I think the Flash, were they meaning to pay homage to what's going on here because they totally took the same meta approach.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean they did. And the thing is most superhero shows they need that because they're like, okay, we got to have some way to give everybody a monster of the week. And
But they
how are we
specifically
going to
had
do it?
it because Smallville did it first, and I had forgotten
It's
this,
like, oh,
where
everyone's
whatever is
affected by
happening
kryptonite.
related to the kryptonite,
Yeah.
yeah, you freeze in a lake and there are kryptonite rocks underneath, then you're cold and you suck heat out of people, or I'm forgetting some of the others, but
The
um
bug guy.
the bug guy, yeah, the kryptonite
It's like
infected
I
bugs
connect
get you.
butterflies and kryptonite was there. Now I control bugs.
Now
It's
and he's essentially a bug himself. I
and
don't
he's a
fully
yeah. There's a
understand.
lot going on. There's a
So
lot
yeah,
going
there's a
on.
lot going on. All of a
But
sudden, well, there's the wall of weird. So weird stuff's been going on, but it really seems to start increasing
yeah,
right around the
it's
same
because
time.
she Chloe has like a National Enquirer board, but it's just all real things that happened and nobody's paying attention to it.
Yeah.
And but what's funny is I do the kryptonite thing. It does kind of remind me how in life things can be going perfectly fine, and then all of a sudden everything is going wrong. Right?
Mm.
Clark was doing just fine, and all of a sudden there's kryptonite toys in his cereal box. Like there's kryptonite everywhere. Like,
Everywhere.
oh, I'm gonna go get some corn feed. What? Green corn feed? What is this? Like it is bonkers
So,
how many places. Like the class rings made of
oh yeah, those were red
kryptonite.
kryptonite, right?
They're red kryptonite. Yes,
Yeah,
red
and then he gets
kryptonite.
all weird and he rides
Yes.
motorcycles and stuff.
Best Clark.
Yeah.
Best Clark.
I enjoyed that Clark, I do have to
Yes.
say. Yeah, so it gets to the point where I would expect him to have a phobia of green.
Absolutely.
It just react have physiological reactions to things that are green, especially things that are green that look rock like or shiny. Hit that similar color as kryptonite. I mean, he'd have to.
Yeah.
Just the amount of times he is around kryptonite and the amount it affects him. He has got to have some sort of intense fear of the color green. He has
You
to.
would think, and I do love, because throughout this show, for the first 6 or 7 seasons, he's doing everything he can to make things work with Lana, right?
Yeah.
Episode 1, we see that she has a kryptonite necklace
Yep.
around her neck. That does not tell you, Clark, that this is a red flag.
Okay, Keaton, I have an intriguing query about this.
Okay.
So, she's been wearing that for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's having this reaction to it. We don't know how long he's been having the reaction, but he gets nauseous and sick and whatever. He has this reaction happening because of her necklace. So, there's research to suggest that when you have an anxiety response, you're more likely to be attracted or aroused by someone or something romantic, sexual, etc.
Okay. Right.
So what I'm wondering is how much is he into Lana versus he was kind of into Lana and then the necklace starts doing weird things to him physiologically and then he's attributing that and it's actually causing more attraction.
So I do think you're right. I think most of it was the kryptonite though. Because and here's why. Because there's this one ridiculous, like, I was watching a season 4 episode, and I can't remember who the villain. The villain was like Mr. Mitzelsplit or whatever it is, and he has like
Yeah.
magic powers. And Clark trips, and he's talking to his dad, and he's like, "Dad, have you ever known me in my life to trip?" And I'm like, "What? Are you that perfect? You can't even trip? You've
He
never
falls
tripped?"
he falls in one of the first episodes around Lana specifically
Because
due
of
to the necklace.
due to the necklace, right? And so this
Dude,
man, he's just walking, talking perfection with great late '90s, early 2000s hair.
poor Chloe. She should have just slip a little kryptonite in your pocket. That boy would have
God,
been yours.
oh my God, Chloe, I feel so bad for her. The first couple seasons of Smallville are hard to watch just
Mm,
because Chloe just gets left in the dust so much. It's rough, but like it is funny though how Clark has just gone through, and it's just like, yeah, I'm adopted, and I have a pretty cool life. I live in a cool barn that's not temperature controlled, but they never really touch on it. Um,
yeah, I mean
and
he's got
yeah,
superpowers. Maybe that helps control his.
yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
Uh,
that's fair. That's fair. That makes sense. But yeah, he's doing and all of a sudden now, all of these people are infected with kryptonite that weren't really around before, apparently, and all of these all of this kryptonite's all over the place. Suddenly, the Luthors are back in town. Like,
oh right, yeah.
everything is happening all at once. On top of that, Lex Luthor is like on Bruce Wayne level, if not higher, as far as people who know who you are. Like, the
Mm.
Luthor family are like American royalty practically. And
Oh, I
suddenly
see what you're saying.
now,
Mhm.
not only are all these things happening, but now the most known popular bachelor guy on the planet is now like, hey, let's be best friends. I'm like, Clark, what is happening right now?
Yeah, yeah, and there's definitely this sense that he is someone who was more of a background character before the show started, and I think his parents tried to instill that into him purposefully.
Yeah,
So because they knew there were these risks if
yeah,
people looked too closely, so they wanted to be a bit invisible. And that, yeah, it started working less and less. And the tricky thing with Lex too is he's like the best and worst friend to have. So he actually is really caring
yeah,
and I really like how he relates to Clark and even tries to help Clark and be friendly to Clark's friends and he handles pretty well the fact that people hate him just because of what his family's done. And on the flip side, he's been raised by his dad and he probably has, some genetic similarities to his dad where he's a bit ruthless.
yeah.
So he pretty quickly starts looking into Clark. When he doesn't know the answer to something, it really bothers him. If someone tries to manipulate him, he's not going to let that happen, and he will take you out. So
Yeah.
he's definitely one of those people where if you're on his good side, it can be a really great thing.
Yes, he falls
But
in love with Clark very, very fast. It's like the first or second episode. He's
yeah.
talking to Clark. He's like, "Our friendship is gonna be the thing of legend," and I'm like, "Aren't you 25?" like, aren't you
He's
20?
like
Are you
grooming Clark.
are you are you talking to a high schooler right
Yeah,
now?
it's I mean, those
But they, like I
friendships are
say,
out there.
age isn't a thing in this show. Age isn't a
Yeah.
thing in this show because later on, Lana is definitely dating the football coach, Jensen Ackles. Like,
Oh, I forgot that's who he
oh
was.
yeah, yeah, it's
Oh my
all.
god.
Yeah, but also, his mom was also a medieval immortal witch that
Uh,
was
you know,
also, yeah.
sure.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. Yeah, and here's the interesting thing too with Lex is he seemed to really connect with Clark's wholesomeness. And then the fact that Clark had to hide so many of these things, and it was a mismatch with the wholesome side of him.
Yeah,
Honestly, I think that really confused Lex in a way that he just could not get past.
yeah.
And it's part of what set him on the path to be Lex
Yeah,
Luthor.
he just, because the thing is, Lex has been raised in pretty much the opposite world
Mm,
that Clark was raised in. And so he sees like this loving family and it basically confuses him. Like,
yeah.
what is happening here? I feel for him. I really feel for him because it's, I've said this before about, and we'll get back to Clark because he is the hero in training here. But I
Mm,
have said before that Lex Luthor and Bruce Wayne are like two sides of the same
yeah.
coin,
Yeah.
because look at who Bruce is looking back at and basically trying to make proud
Mm,
versus who Lex is looking back at and trying to basically surpass instead.
yeah.
Like and they end up being pretty much very much the same person moving
And they're both
dozens
obsessive.
of chess moves ahead, both
Yep.
obsessive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a ton of similarities. And it's an intriguing question, though, of there are a lot of relationships around Clark as he's trying to figure himself out. And none of this is to say anything negative about Clark. I truly think that character is figuring things out as best he can.
He does a good job.
He does a good job, and a lot of people around him really do struggle directly or indirectly because of his powers and what's going on with those. And
Yeah. And
unfortunately, that's going to happen. There's no way that that's not going to ripple out to everyone around you when there's just that much stuff going on.
it's funny because I always give Superman so much hell about always seeing things in black or white.
Mm,
And I'm like, oh man, Jonathan Kent's way worse. Like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, you know what? I'm not gonna beat up on Clark seeing things in black and white anymore. Because his dad, it's not even a spectrum with him. There's no gray in the middle at all. Like, it's just the Luthor's bad, corn good. Like, it's like it's nothing in between. That's it. Farm is good, Luthor's bad. Clark,
I
homework.
can see that
That's
being
it.
very tempting, though, when you've got a kid that really is throwing you through the ringer, trying to simplify things wherever you can, but then you're Clark and you're growing up, and your parents are caring and they're there for you, and at the same time, it's got to be so hard because you're a teenager, you think you don't understand, no one understands, and all that stuff going on, and then literally no one can understand.
Yeah.
Because as far as we know, you're the only alien.
And honestly, this is kind of, I feel like it's a little on the parents because the thing is, they found him in a field as a baby. they had prep time for this conversation.
Oh, we already know how you feel about this. You brought this up a few times already this season
I
about, hey
believe it.
now, how long do we wait before we fill somebody in on a secret like
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like, oh wow, I'm an alien. Like, man, would have been really nice to know for a long time now when you wouldn't let me go on certain field trips and just
Mm,
said it's because you're sick and I felt fine. Like,
that's a
there's
great
so many
point.
different
So,
times when it's like, oh well,
hmm, you
come on,
know,
help me out.
part of the humble piece of Clark might be the fact that he was treated human for so long, but at the same time, that would be such a mental twist. It's yeah, his parents trying to work in subtleties and oh, you can't do that because you need to work on the farm, or coming up with reasons that don't quite make sense for things. That that would be hard, and it could definitely skew. I don't know, skew his sense of what reality is. So yeah, that shift in reality would be really bizarre. And then, I mean,
Yeah,
add the fact that you're a freaking teenager.
yeah, that does not help things because well, because it's it's the same way when you have stress with family to deal with, right? And or stress at work to deal with. No matter what's going on, you still have other stuff. You still got to cook dinner, you still got to do laundry, you still
Mm,
got to pay bills, and things just kind of stack. And an existential crisis from not knowing where you're from and finding out you're the only known alien on the planet, that makes AP US history a little bit difficult,
that is true. I
right?
wonder how his grades went after that.
I think his grades were fine. I think Clark's grades were always I think they were always fine
Well,
because like he was yeah, I think he was
I guess it
he
helps if you
was
can
not
speed
the
read.
right. He wasn't I don't think he was like the smartest person in his class. So some backstories on Superman, he's a genius. Like
Oh,
Superman Earth 1, he's like Superman Earth 1, he can just he's light years ahead of
huh.
anyone on Earth. He's extremely brilliant. But in this, I think he's just his brain is normal.
I think so
His brain
too,
is
because especially
yeah.
when Lois ends up coming in later on, I think her intellect is one of the things that really throws him through the ringer and pulls his attention.
Yeah, even the but and it's funny because like Lois in Smallville is she's so interesting because you can tell she's smart, but she just doesn't care about school.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that's funny. She's like oh she almost didn't graduate from high school, but it's
Yeah.
because she was just
Once
I
again,
ain't got time. I ain't got time for
once
this.
again, poor
Like,
Chloe. I mean, I know this is
oh,
about Clark today, but poor Chloe again. She's been trying to get into the news and media this whole time, and then her cousin just waltzes in.
oh yeah, yeah. I think there's an episode about
I
that
think there
too.
is. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, look, now we're all at the Daily Planet.
I know, right? Oh, poor Chloe.
Yeah, poor
Yeah,
Chloe.
it is an interesting thing where okay, you find out you are adopted from outer space
Yep,
and you still have to go to school. And cuz his parents expect him to still go to school, still help on the
yeah,
farm.
yep.
To their credit, still have friends and hang out and they want you to be a kid or be a teenager at this point. But
Which
yeah, no,
is easier to do when you're Superman. You have a lot more energy left,
that's fair.
and you get tasks done a whole lot
Yep.
quicker.
Yep. Yeah. It it is very very tricky. And what's interesting too is that he's not just learning, or he's not only, what I mean is he's not only learning about this and then that's the only change. He also has more powers increasingly happening for him as well.
Yes,
And
yes,
one, like you said, also the increasing amounts of kryptonite that seem to be just rising up from the ether. that
Yeah.
inevitably he somehow comes into contact with whoever is dealing with all the funkiness from that. So he, even if he wanted to, he can't just focus on being normal, average, whoever, because you're climbing the rope at gym and you fall down and all of a sudden you can see through the walls and see through people's skin to their bones and sinews and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just trying to figure out what's going on. And then as the show progresses, of course, he starts hitting these points where he has to decide, okay, what is more important
Mm.
here? I do want to continue. I do love playing sports, but this clearly is not going to work.
No.
And that had to be hard to walk away from because his whole life was ahead of him. He was going to be an NFL quarterback, and it was going to
Yeah.
be he was going to be the best in the league. Even and I always saw it as wrong ethically a little bit because I'm like, you can't get injured, dude. Like that right there in itself is what doesn't make it
So
fair.
it's not against any of the rules, is it?
What? Being an alien and playing football?
Yeah.
Or I mean, no, but that's because in this universe there's no aliens.
That's a good point. If there were aliens, they'd probably say humans only.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they would knowing
Yeah,
people.
knowing people. It's true.
This is Kansas.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Knowing people and it is an interesting thing with sports where what people decide is allowed. So for example, they started, what is it, testosterone, that they started looking at certain levels in women athletes to decide if you were woman
Hmm.
enough to
Oh
play,
yeah,
do
they.
your sport, all sorts of weird stuff, so people think it's
Oh yeah,
quote fair. It's really
yeah.
not
See,
fair.
it's not just nerds that gatekeep.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, and so it was. But yeah, he has to make that decision. Like, okay, I can't do that. But he also makes the conscious decision of I know that I'm able to save
Yeah.
people and I'm going to. And a lot of the times he even goes outside the parameters that Jor-El, his actual
Mm.
father, gives him. Like he's like, "Oh, you can't do that." And he's like, "I'm going to do that. I'm going to save these people." Yes, 80% of the time it is Lana that I'm saving and I have to save Lana because for some reason this all of Metropolis and all of Smallville is just obsessed with this one girl.
Well, for him, it's because the kryptonite has tricked him into thinking that she is the one.
Even when she doesn't have the necklace at that point, the
No, it's already
Pavlov's dog
happened.
damage
Yeah,
has
the
already
Pavlov's
been
dog
done.
has already drooled over
It's
the
taken effect.
Kryptonian food. Yeah.
It's taken effect.
Yeah, yeah.
I
He's already it's already happened at that point. Um Yeah. I love how that sort of stuff happens where I actually love episodes, and I can't remember for Smallville, but in all sorts of other shows, I love when the hero gets busted because they save one or two people way too much. And I'm like, "Ha, that's what you get."
yeah,
Because speaking of ethics, how ethical is it if you're paying more attention to those people? But at the same time, we'd all do it. You save the people you care about more. You're
and
also
that's a
around them
yeah,
more. You're more likely to know when they're in trouble, all that sort of stuff.
and
Um,
that's an issue that I think all heroes run into,
yeah.
right? Like even if you think about like the Super Mario Brothers, they're saving the princess all the time.
Mm.
I've never seen them do any plumbing. It just so happens they're in a dinosaur universe that has
They do
pipes
it in the movie.
conveniently
The
everywhere.
movie that recently came out, they actually do
I
plumbing in
hadn't
that
seen it
movie. Oh,
yet.
really?
Okay, I need to
I didn't
watch it.
spoil
I need to
anything, I
watch it.
promise.
Okay. Well, yeah, they're
It's
plumbers.
cute.
But yeah,
It's cute. I mean,
I'll
it's
check
no
it out.
top
Definitely.
10 movie, but it's cute.
But yeah, every hero like always like and they always end up in a situation where they have to frantically lie about what they were doing and where they were. Batman's the only one that's good at it. He seems like the only one that's good at coming up with a reason. Like, oh yeah, I was out on the yacht with all these supermodels. See, I bought out the
Mm.
cinema and all the supermodels are there. Like Batman's the only one that does it well. But
Well, money helps with creating an alibi.
That's fair. I
Yeah.
will give you that. That is true. But Clark has horrible
Well, yeah.
alibis.
He's
He
terrible.
has bad alibi. Clark, you were supposed to be here. What are you doing? I'm sorry. I can't tell you.
I left my homework at
Like,
home and I had to go back
he
and get
doesn't
it.
even. What's bad is half the time he doesn't even lie. He just
Looks
either
sheepish.
looks at you like just stares at you until like hopefully you walk away, or he just goes, "I'm sorry, I can't tell you."
It would be hard. It would be hard all of a sudden you've got to keep all these secrets. Although he had a few secrets he was obviously hiding before them, but yeah, that would be really really hard. And he has multiple friends who are
Mhm.
actively trying to snoop into his life. Sometimes they don't know that they're snooping into his life. Other times they know.
Yeah,
But I mean, Chloe's Wall of Weird from the get-go,
yeah.
that's snooping into his background without her intending to.
Well,
Lex
also,
Luthor, very early on,
yeah.
snooping into stuff because hey, this kid saved me, so I must know everything about him now. Yeah.
Well, also, yeah. This day and age,
Oh,
if
no chance of hiding.
if you live in a town where people are constantly disappearing
Mm.
and showing up dead and dying, and you just have a friend and you never know where he is, and he shows up and he's like, I can't tell you where I was."
Oh,
This is a serial killer documentary waiting to happen,
interesting.
right?
You're right. He totally would get reported
Yeah,
for something.
he would. Yes, it would be very suspicious. The only reason it doesn't happen is because I think Smallville goes through like two or three different sheriffs. One of
Mm.
them ends up, all of them end up, I think, dying, but a couple of them end up being evil. There's
Yeah,
definitely some evil policemen, evil FBI
sure.
agents, evil sheriffs. Like, yeah. And so that plenty of legally uh, lawfully evil
Well, here's an
opportunities in Smallville that keep Clark from being seen.
yeah, here's another thing too though is keep in mind he was brought up to try to not take the limelight, so he's not going to pull focus unless he keeps showing up everywhere. So he does pull more and more focus over time. But then also in terms of what do you think he's doing? We don't think that when someone is more attractive, here's attractiveness coming back up again. When someone's more attractive, we actually attribute more positive things to them. So take Ted Bundy for example. People didn't think of him as a serial killer. He was doing lots of
I
sketchy
didn't think
stuff.
of him as attractive. I
I mean, for
I
back then, and for back then,
I don't
but
think was
back.
even back then. He was no Burt Reynolds. I'm just saying. Like I just
I'm not saying he's the most handsome person in the world, but he had a charisma to him. He was I so I think people have described he wouldn't stand out in a crowd, but he leaned attractive and so we think that people who are
he was
serial
a
killers are
7.
going to stand out as serial killery and they don't know. So all
Right.
I'm
He
saying
wasn't
is
yeah.
Clark if that had been the direction he had gone, he might have gotten away with it for a while.
I can trust him. Look
Yeah.
at those
Look at those
eyes.
blue eyes.
Yeah. But yeah, I can't remember what season it is that they just give up trying to make him look normal and they're like, fine, he's chiseled.
It's just
He's an Adonis. Fine. It's probably season 4 when they finally are like, yes, he's too big for us to not let him play football. Like,
especially in a small town like that.
right.
Football is
Yeah,
king. Yeah.
I think it had to be season 4 when they're like, okay, yeah, look at him. Yes, we're gonna have, even in the writer's room, they were like, really?
So
Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to let him play football this
I
season.
wonder though. So those kinds of things would be so frustrating. Holding yourself back, limiting what you do, limiting
Oh
how
yeah,
much you put into things, not being able to fully commit to anything. Because
and that's something Superman has to do all the time. He's
yeah.
always walking on
So
eggshells.
here's the thing. I wonder if that frustration actually pulls for becoming a hero or villain of some sort. where you can't, because in his real life there's the concern of people trying to dissect you or coming after your family or all these things that could come up if people found out you're an alien. But if you can separate that
Hmm.
somehow and have a place where you can fully do the powers and um pull your punches less. I mean, I know he's usually
Right.
pulling punches anyway, but ways that you can get that out even if it's not in your day-to-day life. I wonder if the that very frustration of, I mean, okay, I finally get to do football, but then I have to decide not to do it because is this fair? Is this whatever? People don't care if it's fair if you're saving them from death and scary
Right.
stuff. They're like, yeah, use the powers. So
Right.
I wonder if that frustration leads to someone saying, I need an outlet.
Yeah, and I think it absolutely does, and and it's funny because like in Smallville, he can't just go on a leisurely flight to clear his head.
Mm.
He has the super speed. He has because
Oh, right.
Small. I think when they pitched Smallville, they literally said in the pitch meeting, "No flights, no tights." So he's not going to have the costume,
Yeah.
and he's not going to be able to fly throughout the entire show. And they kept their word because it is the season finale,
Yep.
season 10 finale, the very last episode of Smallville, when you finally see him take off and with the suit on. That's the first time you see it. It's the last episode. And I do love that they did it that
Oh,
way.
me
They
too.
kept their
Yeah.
word. But yeah, and it's he can't just he can definitely run away from things, but it's not it's he always has to go back. He still has a math test to take,
Mm.
right? He can't and one of my favorite things they did, and conveniently it was during the summer break, was at the end of season 2, something happens. He mistakenly hurts his mom and he runs away from home. He puts on the red
I was
kryptonite
just thinking
ring,
about that.
gets on the motorcycle and just rides off into the sunset. And he spends the summer in Metropolis just like clubbing it up and
Mhm.
robbing banks as a high schooler.
I was actually
And
thinking that where it would
no
be
one
really
asks.
hard to focus in on those things, especially do I just have to at least in this one he's not limiting himself in terms of learning probably, but maybe the speed in which he's doing certain things he's slowing down, but I
Yeah.
do this to then go and hold myself back somewhere else to then do this, that, and the other. And so I found it very realistic that something could happen and the dam just breaks. And that red kryptonite would be so tempting.
Yeah.
It's
But
essentially going on a binge or
yeah,
um,
that's true.
midlife
Yeah.
crisis or all these things where we
Yeah.
have these stereotypes of things that you do to get an escape, to change
Hmm.
things up, that makes so much sense with everything going on for him, that there are these moments where he just can't do it anymore.
And I had a question. I had a question for you because from a therapy standpoint, because people get introduced to things where it's like once it get introduced, it's like this is something you're going to have to deal with your entire
Mm.
life, like losing a limb or going blind or getting diagnosed with a disease that's not curable at the time, right? Is it one of those things where you feel like learning to deal with it and cope with it is better when you are younger
Mm.
or when you are, I guess, older? Like, because like it's one thing because it's like a high school and middle school is always a just tough time.
Yeah.
And so adding something like that has to be difficult. But at the same time, I also wonder, would it be any easier if he waited 5 years from now? Probably not. You
Mm.
know, like I always kind of wonder that.
So
And
in
I was
terms
gonna
of like
ask,
when he got his powers and all these changes started happening,
yeah,
that's a really good question. So some of the examples you gave, and it's a good question in general, when there are these big changes that essentially make it so you're very different than the average person. It doesn't mean there's something
yes.
right or wrong with you.
Right.
Sometimes there's something that might be harming you, some sort of disease process or something. But a lot of it is you're different in some way. And so you have to adjust to a world where, in a lot of places, you're going to stand out or it's not quite a fit for you. And so that's the newer, I mean, it's not super brand new, but essentially the current way of thinking about disability is when these things end up actually impacting a person's life, it's not the person who is disabled or the thing that happened to them or they're experiencing that's a disability. It's the interaction between that person and the environments they're in. They're made, those environments are made for people who interact differently with the world. So,
Right.
in that way, I definitely see how you're looking at that comparison where
Hmm.
interestingly for him it's not a loss of a sense, a loss of a limb, a loss of
Right.
some sort of adaptability because of symptoms or something. It's actually a gaining of
It is.
something
It
where
is.
he
And I guess I
has,
was thinking of it that way because of how you mentioned how basically he has to walk on eggshells
right,
suddenly. He can't
yeah.
do things the same
So I
way.
hadn't really thought of it. It's interesting thinking of it as a disability because we always think of, oh, how cool, he can do all these extra things, but he does. He has to be very tentative, and it's got to be hard to essentially wear kid gloves with everything. Um, so in terms of when that sort of thing happens, so there are certain approaches that can sometimes be easier for people. So um, someone who is more flexible in their way of thinking is going to have an easier time. Someone who is good at staying present focused, who's good at I change the things I can control and then I accept the things I cannot change. Someone who has those sorts of traits in general is going to adapt better to a big change like that. In general, probably the younger you are, the easier it will be to adapt. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's always the case, but um, the brain is still developing. So, for example, young kids who have seizure disorders, sometimes huge chunks of the brain cease to work and the other parts of the brain recalibrate. And so it can make up for all of that. Versus if you have that loss of brain activity later in life, you tend to have a lot more struggles because your brain just doesn't have the same ability to heal and adapt. It's amazing what the brain can do. It's just those younger years are really when your whole body is growing and learning what it's going to do. So
Hmm.
you're probably going to learn faster, maneuver around any changes quicker, kind of like learning a new language, like sign language, for example. That's gonna or braille or other things. That's gonna happen a lot faster if you're younger, just like
Hmm.
in any other language. So younger would probably be easier just generally. And at the same time, who knows? Maybe some people it might be easier knowing that they had those experiences when they were younger. And so for some, maybe the way they cope is if it happens later in life, is being able to find a way to appreciate the experiences they had before. So it anyone can overcome or be able to manage those difficulties that come their way. But a lot of times, the younger brain is just more adaptable in some ways.
One thing that I will say that Clark did have at his advantage was that he was gaining these abilities separately and he had
Mm,
time to get a grip on them one at a time. Like he had super speed, then he had the super strength and the
yep.
invulnerability. And then, of course, he had the heat vision that kicked in and the x-ray vision that kicked in before that. And then he when he came out of the phantom zone, he caught an alien cold, which is where
Oh
his
wow.
super breath came from.
Forgot about that. Yes.
That's and so he had a chance to deal with them all one by one instead of all of it hitting at once.
Which is great. And so I think you're totally right. Those gradual changes. Okay, let me adapt to this thing. Let me take it on, figure this thing out. And then the next one hits. A lot less overwhelming, probably in some ways. And then in other ways, at a certain point he might be like, is this ever going to end? Every time I feel like I finally found my way, here's another power. So in some ways I wonder if it just, you're like, can we stop now? I'm good with powers. How many of these are
Yeah,
going to get added on?
right. Yeah, and like because you look at all the other, you look at some of the other superheroes. Like I mean, Spider-Man, his stuff just all kicked
Yep.
in.
Most of them,
It's
I
like
think,
super.
right?
He woke up with abs, super speed. Like he's fat, like the super reflexes. He can stick to walls.
Man, why
The
can't I just wake
Yeah.
up with abs one day?
Hey, I mean,
That'd be nice.
if you can, you just gotta go to sleep with them.
Yeah.
I'm hilarious. Yeah, but yeah, and I mean Clark just from the jump, just abs on abs.
My
Like,
goodness.
just
Yeah.
everyone on that show is extremely good looking though. Like
Yeah. I mean, so okay, the extremely good looking is ridiculous. Don't get me wrong.
it's the corn and the kryptonite.
So
It's
the
kryptonite
corn,
and the corn.
though. So okay, there's something to be said
It's the kryptonite
though.
and the
Farm
corn.
life, in some ways, can be really hard, and at the same time, he's doing a lot of physical labor, helping around the farm and the house and everything. So to me, being a bulkier kid makes sense. Kind of like a PETA in Hunger Games. They talk about him being
Yeah.
really strong because he did all the stuff in the bakery, flipping the
Hmm.
pounds of flour around and stuff. Um, so that part is more acceptable to me. The level of attractiveness of this Smallville town is wild.
It's a bit unhinged. It's a bit I'm like, is this a school for models? Like, what is happening right now? Like, really? Like, I don't know.
Your self
Like,
esteem must
it's
be so terrible just looking around and seeing that everyone is gorgeous.
right. Like, how? Like, yeah. It's a little bit like, come on, really,
It's what the internet's like now.
really?
Smallville was the
Yeah.
internet before social media got out of control.
It was
Because,
before.
yeah, social media is
Yeah.
just all these ridiculously gorgeous people doing ridiculous things, always positive, not showing. Yeah.
Well, and honestly, yeah, I'll give you this about Smallville too. You're right because social media, everyone puts their wins,
Mm-hmm.
but no one puts their losses,
Yep.
right? Smallville's the same way. It's like, oh my God, Lana, she's so cool. She's so great. Everyone loves her. And meanwhile, she's just constantly mourning her parents in the
Yeah, that's
background and
sad.
taking late night walks to the graveyard. Same thing with Clark. It's like, man, that guy's built. That guy, he's a football Hall of Famer. And it's like, yeah, his planet blew up. He has no parents. Right. But that's his own thing. Even with Lex Luthor, billionaire, coolest guy on the planet, but he has so many skeletons in his
It's
closet,
true. Yeah.
right? But social media is the same way. You will get
Mm-hmm.
on social media and you'll walk away from it depressed because you're like, wow, that guy got a new car. Well, they just got a house. Wow, she looks really great in that dress. And you have no idea what other things they're going through.
Like,
You're just seeing their wins.
and not only that, but the wins look different
Yeah.
from far away. So have you seen the pictures of someone taking pictures of influences for
Yes.
influencers? Those are
And how
hysterical.
ridiculous. Yeah, it looks
You
so
see how
ridiculous.
people make things up to look really good, and it's
Yes,
something that we naturally do. The internet has taken it and run away with it in a lot of, unfortunately, ways that can be really unhealthy for all of us.
absolutely.
And yeah, it's Smallville is definitely like that a lot. There's a
Yeah,
lot of really, you hit on a lot of great examples. Really pretty surface level. You don't have to dig very deep to find 50,000 tons of kryptonite
yeah.
and
It's like,
some
yeah,
big struggles for everybody.
yeah. It's like, yep. She does look really good looking, but she also has an eating disorder and sucks the life out of her victims. Which, funny enough, that was Amy Adams who ended up playing.
Oh my god, it was.
Yeah, yeah. She ended up playing Lois
Yeah,
later on.
all comes full circle.
All comes full circle.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.